my God!
At 8:30 p.m. local time on October 9th, Milton made landfall on the west coast of Florida with the intensity of a Category 3 hurricane. Milton's destructive power was immediately demonstrated upon landing. The powerful storm surge quickly flooded coastal areas, washing away and collapsing many buildings and infrastructure. The powerful winds swept through, overturning houses, uprooting trees, knocking down power poles, and causing blackouts for millions of people. In southwest Florida alone, more than 3.3 million homes and businesses were without power. Milton made landfall with sustained winds of up to 120 miles per hour, 193 kilometers per hour, which was enough to cause serious damage. Worryingly, Milton also brought a staggering storm surge of up to 28 feet, 8.5 meters. The powerful storm surge coupled with sustained strong winds is bound to cause a devastating blow to this area. Another major disaster brought about by Milton was the tornado. Before landing, this hurricane had triggered dozens of strong tornadoes in southern Florida, several of which reached EF3 intensity, causing heavy casualties and property damage. In St. Lucie County alone, 6 people died from tornadoes. 2 people were killed in St. Petersburg and 3 in Volusia counties. As the hurricane moved inland, heavy rainfall also wreaked havoc in central and eastern Florida. Up to 18 inches, 45 centimeters, of rain fell in some areas, causing severe flooding. Millions of residents were forced to move to safety to escape violent storms and life-threatening floods. Hurricane Milton caused unprecedented destruction in Florida. Hundreds of thousands of homes have been destroyed, infrastructure has been severely damaged, and millions of people have been left without power and water. Unfortunately, the storm also claimed many lives. The good news is that despite being hit so hard, Florida managed to avoid the worst-case scenario and avoid massive casualties. But that doesn't mean the aftermath of this hurricane can be easily resolved. The local government and people still need to make arduous efforts to recover from this unprecedented and devastating disaster. Hurricane Milton caused severe damage throughout Florida, but the extent of its impact varied by region. Coastal areas undoubtedly suffered the heaviest losses. Sarasota County, on the west coast, where Milton made landfall, suffered the full brunt of the hurricane. Local residents witnessed how ferociously the waves washed over the beach, setting off waves as high as 28 feet high and swallowing up houses and buildings along the coast. The powerful storm surge also caused massive inland flooding, inundating entire communities. Many houses were completely demolished in this violent storm, with roofs ripped off, windows smashed, and furniture and appliances washed away. According to local officials, at least 5 people were killed here, most of them caused by tornadoes. Also suffering is the city of St. Petersburg on the west coast. The coastal city was buffeted by violent winds brought by Milton, causing widespread damage. One of the most famous local landmarks, the Tampa Bay Rays Stadium, Tropicana Field, had its roof torn off by strong winds and turned into rubble. A large crane was overturned in the city center and crashed into nearby high-rise buildings. Authorities said at least 2 people were killed in the city. Hillsborough County, just north of Tampa Bay, also suffered significant damage. In this metropolitan area with a population of more than 1 million, power outages are very serious, with more than 70% of homes and shops experiencing power outages. Officials said that local infrastructure was severely damaged, many roads were flooded and power poles collapsed, causing paralysis, which made rescue efforts very difficult. Another major disaster that Hurricane Milton brought to Florida was the powerful tornadoes that swept across the state. In just 20 minutes before the hurricane made landfall, more than 10 strong tornadoes occurred locally, causing huge damage. St. Lucie County was hit by the worst tornadoes. A violent tornado devoured a retirement community, killing 6 people instantly. Local residents recalled that the tornado was like a huge steel ball rolling over their houses and sweeping everything away. Houses were razed to the ground, cars were overturned, and debris was scattered everywhere. The tornado overturned a giant truck and flipped it directly onto the road. In Polk County, a county worker was killed while clearing trees from a road. He and his colleagues were using a chainsaw to cut down a fallen tree when a pickup truck hit them, killing the 68-year-old employee on the spot. Meanwhile, 4 people died in Volusia County due to tornado damage. They included a 79-year-old woman and a 54-year-old woman, who were both killed by falling trees. The damage caused by these tornadoes can be described as horrific. They flattened entire neighborhoods, destroying homes and cars, and devouring the lives of residents along with them. These deadly twisters are undoubtedly one of the greatest disasters Hurricane Milton has ever brought to Florida. Damage to infrastructure, such as power outages and water outages. Hurricane Milton wreaked havoc on Florida's infrastructure. Electricity supply, in particular, has become the biggest victim. According to PowerOutage.us, which tracks utility reports across the United States, more than 3.3 million homes and businesses in Florida were without power on the day the hurricane made landfall. This means that approximately 10 million people are without power. The most severely damaged areas are concentrated in central and western Florida, such as Highland and Hardee counties, where more than 88% of customers are without power. Even in Hillsborough County, located in the Tampa Bay area, more than 70% of customers are without power. Power outages not only mean that residents' lives are seriously affected, but also bring great difficulties to emergency rescue work. Not only were the traffic lights on the streets paralyzed, but important facilities such as hospitals and schools were also plunged into darkness. The local government said that power supply to most areas will be restored in the next few days, but this is still a difficult task. In addition to electricity, water supplies have also been disrupted. In St. Petersburg, a burst water pipe caused a citywide water outage. Although authorities later repaired the pipes, residents still had to boil their tap water before normal water supply could be restored. Florida's infrastructure really took a hit from this hurricane. Power outages and water outages have seriously affected rescue operations and brought great inconvenience to the lives of residents in the disaster areas. Local governments and utility departments must repair these critical facilities as soon as possible to restore normal order to the disaster area. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and turning on the little bell. For the next week, we will update the latest news on hurricanes in the United States every day. When Hurricane Milton ravaged Florida, emergency rescue personnel of all types were not afraid of risks and risked their lives in rescue work, saving the lives of countless trapped people. Among them, the most outstanding performance is undoubtedly the U.S. Coast Guard. Just as the Milton winds were raging, the Coast Guard received a frightening call for help. A man found himself in distress on the high seas in the Gulf of Mexico, stranded 30 miles, 48 kilometers, offshore, clinging to a floating ice chest to stay alive. This man was originally driving a boat, but he was in danger in a storm. The boat sank, and he was thrown into the rough waves. Faced with such a dangerous situation, the Coast Guard quickly dispatched a helicopter to rescue. When the crew arrived at the scene, they saw rough seas, wind and rain, and extremely low visibility. In such a harsh environment, the rescuers still bravely jumped into the sea, risked their lives, and swam to the man and rescued him on the helicopter. The lucky captain eventually made it back to shore safely. This wasn't the Coast Guard's only heroic rescue operation during the hurricane. In the Tampa Bay area, they also rescued another person stranded at sea. The man was anchored in a small boat when he was in danger during the storm and was swallowed by huge waves. Fortunately, the Coast Guard arrived in time and pulled him onto the helicopter to ensure his safe return. In addition to the coast, rescue workers are also fighting bravely on land. Hillsborough County police officers found a 14-year-old boy floating on a fence during the storm and dying. They immediately pulled him into a lifeboat and took him to a safe place. These heroic rescue operations undoubtedly saved countless lives. When the hurricane was raging, these brave rescuers rushed into the center of the storm without hesitation, regardless of their personal safety, just to pull the people in distress back to a safe harbor. Their selfless dedication and fearless spirit of sacrifice are undoubtedly the brightest highlights of this disaster. While the heroic performance of rescue workers has attracted much attention, for ordinary Florida residents, this hurricane is undoubtedly a thrilling nightmare. Maria Bowman in South Tampa Bay had a horrific experience. The 70-year-old lives in a mobile home near the Caloosahatchee River and faces severe storm surge threats. When Milton made landfall, she felt the whole house shake. It sounded like an explosion, bang, and then it went out, she recalled. With the power outage, Ms. Bowman had to face the storm alone. She recalled, "The whole process was like fighting a war. You have never experienced such a terrible thing." The houses around her were blown to pieces, and she couldn't help but worry that her own house would also suffer. Fortunately, her house managed to hold on as the storm passed through. But Ms. Bowman said she was tired of facing such hurricanes again and didn't know how long she could last. In St. Petersburg, Christopher Coleman and her daughter also experienced a horrific experience. When the tornado hit their house, Ms. Coleman recalled, "All of a sudden, my attic door blew off and everything in the house was flying. It was so scary. We were so scared. It felt like the tornado hit our house." In the end, their house was flattened and all their belongings were swallowed up. Connor Fearing, who lives on the island of Matlacha, also witnessed Milton's destructive power. He told reporters, "It all happened in an instant, like a window being blown out. I grabbed 2 dogs and ran under the bed. That's it. About a minute passed." Phelan witnessed the tornado devastation. The horrific sight of houses and overturned cars still haunts him. The personal experiences of these ordinary residents are undoubtedly frightening. They witnessed the destructive power of the hurricane with their own eyes and spent a moment of helplessness and fear in the violent storm. This disaster has caused irreparable trauma to their lives, and they may never forget this nightmare experience again. During the raging days of Hurricane Milton, local officials and residents took various measures to deal with the violent storms and subsequent storm surge threats. In order to prevent severe storm surges, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis issued an evacuation order in time, requiring residents in coastal areas to evacuate as soon as possible. He warned that if people chose to stay in evacuation zones, they could die. Tampa Mayor Jane Castor also called on residents to obey evacuation orders, or you will die. Many residents followed official advice and fled their homes. Matt Faustini is one of them. When he left the town of Largo, he took his most important belongings with him, including cash, fuel, and priceless treasures such as the family tree left by his grandmother. Another resident, Leanna Ramirez, also painfully packed up important documents and photos as she left her Madeira Beach home. However, not everyone was able to evacuate smoothly. Some stubborn residents chose to stay in their homes or were unable to evacuate because they had nowhere to go. For example, 73-year-old Sylvester Fernandez, who lives near Tampa, originally planned to wait out the storm at his home and homestead, but ultimately chose to flee. Even residents who fled faced traffic jams, fuel shortages, and other difficulties. Some people got into trouble on the way and had spent a long time on the road. At the same time, local officials and emergency rescue personnel are also actively taking measures to try to minimize the harm caused to residents by storm surge and strong winds. They dispatched large vehicles and helicopters to launch a large-scale rescue operation and rescued hundreds of trapped residents and pets from danger. Looking back on this hurricane, in early October, a tropical wave gradually developed into a tropical storm in the eastern Caribbean Sea. As the tropical wave moved westward and gradually strengthened, it developed into a hurricane in the central Gulf of Mexico on October 8th. According to the U.S. National Hurricane Center, Milton quickly developed from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in just 24 hours. This rapid increase in hurricane intensity shocked meteorologists. When Milton reached Category 5 hurricane strength in the central Gulf of Mexico, it had maximum sustained winds of 180 miles per hour, 290 kilometers per hour, setting a new record for the region. This hurricane intensity is unprecedented, raising concerns that it could bring catastrophic damage to Florida. The devastation of Hurricane Milton far exceeded people's expectations, which inevitably made people focus on the root cause behind it, climate change. Scientists agree that global warming caused by human activities is increasing the intensity and destructiveness of hurricanes, and Hurricane Milton is the latest strong proof. By pumping large amounts of greenhouse gases and carbonaceous gases into the atmosphere, you trap more heat in the atmosphere, and much of that heat goes into the oceans, said Jennifer Francis, a senior scientist at the Woodwell Climate Research Center. We know that in the oceans, this extra energy is what fuels these storms, making them stronger, causing them to intensify more quickly. And the evaporation of the extra warm water provides them with more moisture that can be used as rain. We've seen these storms brought very heavy rainfall. Indeed, in the context of global warming, the intensity and destructive power of Hurricane Milton are indeed shocking. This hurricane quickly developed from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in just 24 hours, setting a local record. This sharp increase in hurricane intensity is undoubtedly closely related to the rise in ocean temperatures. According to data from NASA, seawater temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico have reached record highs in the past few months. These unusually high seawater temperatures provided sufficient energy and water vapor for the formation and development of Hurricane Milton. As Francis said, this extra energy makes hurricanes more powerful and intensify at an alarming rate. The researchers pointed out that this is not an isolated case. In the past few years, Florida and the southeastern coast of the United States have been hit by unprecedentedly powerful hurricanes. Just 2 weeks ago, Hurricane Helene ravaged the region, causing massive damage and numerous deaths. Experts generally believe that climate change is becoming the culprit of this phenomenon. Rising global temperatures are making hurricanes more powerful and destructive. In addition to causing ocean temperatures to continue to rise, providing a steady stream of energy for hurricanes, climate change is also exacerbating other severe weather factors, such as heavy rainfall and tornadoes. As a typical representative of the southeastern coastal region of the United States, why does Florida frequently encounter unprecedented strong hurricanes? Experts believe that this is mainly due to the following reasons. First, Florida's geographical location makes it highly vulnerable to hurricanes. As a long and narrow peninsula, Florida, the state, has long been a must-pass for tropical cyclones and hurricanes. Hurricanes blowing from the Caribbean usually hit Florida directly. Secondly, the state's coastal areas are mostly low-lying and have many barrier islands and estuaries, making them highly vulnerable to storm surges. For example, Siesta Island, where Milton made landfall this time, and other areas along the western and eastern coasts of Florida are the places most vulnerable to being swallowed up by storm surges. In addition, Florida's socioeconomic conditions also increase its risk of disaster. The population here is dense, and many people choose to live in coastal areas, making them more vulnerable to hurricanes. At the same time, the state is also an important tourist destination, attracting a large number of tourists every year. All these make rescue and recovery work more difficult when a hurricane strikes. Most importantly, climate change is fundamentally changing the climate characteristics of this region. As mentioned earlier, global warming is increasing the intensity of hurricanes, making them more frequent and destructive. This means that Florida will face a more severe hurricane threat in the future. It can be said that Florida has become the forefront of the impact of climate change. The state's geographical environment, social conditions, and climate trends make it a hurricane-hit area. Facing the threat of hurricanes brought by climate change, Florida and the entire southeastern coast of the United States urgently need to take a series of response measures. First, emergency preparedness and response capabilities need to be further strengthened. Local governments must formulate more complete emergency plans, improve early warning capabilities, and ensure sufficient emergency supplies and rescue forces. At the same time, communication with residents must be strengthened to make them fully aware of the dangers and actively prepared for evacuation. Secondly, infrastructure construction must adapt to climate change. Examples include using more wind-resistant and disaster-resistant designs in the construction of homes and buildings and improving the flood resistance of seawalls and dikes. At the same time, key infrastructure such as power grids, communications, and transportation also need to be upgraded to improve disaster resilience. In addition, action must be taken to address the root causes of climate change. Whether it is reducing carbon emissions or increasing carbon absorption, it requires the joint efforts of governments, enterprises, and individuals. Through large-scale renewable energy utilization, afforestation, and other measures, we can curb the trend of global warming and slow down the intensity of hurricanes. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and turning on the little bell. For the next week, we will update the latest news on hurricanes in the United States every day. continue to use a scientific perspective to explore the complex truth behind meteorological events.